Quartermaster A had seen a lot of things during his 15 cycles, manning the security checkpoint at Galactic Station Omega-7. He'd processed Zephyrian diplomats with their tendency to spontaneously combust when nervous, Klaxon merchants who insisted on bringing live explosive fungi as cultural artifacts, and even that one memorable incident with the Vorthin ambassador who'd tried to smuggle a miniature black hole in his luggage. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for what was about to walk through his scanner on this otherwise mundane Tuesday morning. The human approached with the kind of casual confidence that immediately set off every alarm bell in Quartermaster A's four-chambered brain. Brandon Torres, according to the manifest, looked like any other standard bipedal mammalian species: 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head mounted in the approximate center of his torso. Nothing particularly threatening about that arrangement, right? Wrong. So very catastrophically wrong. "Morning," Brandon said, flashing what Quartermaster A would later describe to his therapist as a smile that suggested he'd eaten something that fought back and enjoyed the experience. He stepped into the bioscanner with the kind of easy confidence that most species reserved for entering their own birthing pods. The scanner hummed to life, its advanced sensors designed to detect everything from concealed weapons to infectious diseases to illegal dimensional manipulators. What it was not designed for, apparently, was whatever Brandon Torres was carrying around inside his allegedly normal human body. The first alarm was subtle, a gentle chime that indicated elevated readings. Quartermaster A barely had time to think, probably just forgot to remove his energy pack before the scanner erupted into a symphony of electronic panic. Red lights flashed, sirens wailed, and warning messages scrolled across every available display in 17 different languages, including 3 that had been considered extinct for over a millennium. Brandon said, glancing around at the light show. "Is this normal, or should I be running?" Before Quartermaster could answer, the scanner's AI voice crackled to life, with a tone that suggested it was experiencing the digital equivalent of a nervous breakdown. "Attention, biological anomaly detected. Initiating deep scan protocol. Please remain stationary while we attempt to understand what exactly you are." "Well, that's not ominous at all," Brandon muttered, but stayed put with the resigned patience of someone who'd clearly dealt with malfunctioning technology before. The deep scan lasted approximately 3 seconds before the AI spoke again, its voice now pitched about an octave higher. Question 1. Have you recently engaged in combat with entities classified as Class Omega Divine Beings? Brandon blinked. "Come again?" "Class Omega Divine Beings," the AI repeated helpfully. "Gods, deities, cosmic entities with reality-altering capabilities. Have you fought any recently?" "Define recently." The AI paused, processing. "Within the last solar cycle." "No gods this year," Brandon confirmed with the kind of straight face that made Quartermaster wonder if he was being serious or if humans just had really sophisticated sarcasm protocols. By now the commotion had attracted attention. Judge Quintara, the station's chief judicial officer, approached with her characteristic measured stride, her 6 eyes already analyzing the situation with the kind of methodical precision that had made her famous across 12 star systems. Behind her, Maran, the station's chief science officer, scuttled forward on his 8 spindly legs, his sensor array already extended and clicking with excitement. "What seems to be the issue, Quartermaster?" Judge Quintara asked, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd adjudicated everything from trade disputes to interdimensional war crimes. "The scanner thinks this human fought a god, Quartermaster," explained, his voice cracking slightly on the last word. Question 2, the AI continued, apparently oblivious to the growing audience. "Have you survived direct exposure to weapons rated above Class 7 on the galactic destruction scale?" "What's Class 7? Brandon asked, conversationally. "Planetary surface liquefaction," Maran supplied helpfully, his mandibles clicking with scientific curiosity. "Oh?" Brandon nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, probably. I mean, depends on what you count as a weapon. Does weather count?" The silence that followed was the kind of silence that suggested everyone present was simultaneously questioning their life choices and wondering if they should start writing their wills. "Weather," Judge Quintara repeated slowly, does not typically qualify as a Class 7 destructive force. You haven't met our hurricanes, Brandon said cheerfully. Question 3 coming, or are we done here? I've got groceries to buy and apparently a reputation to explain. The scanner, as if responding to his prompt, immediately chimed again. Question 3. Do you possess regenerative capabilities that exceed standard biological parameters by a factor of 10,000 or more? Well, Brandon said, examining a particularly prominent scar on his forearm, I do heal pretty fast. Comes in handy. Quartermaster A felt his primary heart skip a beat. His secondary heart wasn't doing much better. Around them, more station personnel were gathering, drawn by the increasingly frantic alarm systems and the growing crowd. Word was spreading through the station's communication networks. Something unprecedented was happening at Security Checkpoint 7. Question 4. The AI announced, its voice now carrying what could only be described as electronic hysteria. Are you currently carrying weapons, technology, or biological materials capable of ending civilizations? Brandon patted his pockets thoughtfully. Define ending civilizations. And that, Quartermaster, I realized with growing horror, was exactly the wrong thing to ask. Because the fact that Brandon Torres was asking for clarification rather than simply saying no, suggested that the answer might very well be yes. The scanner's alarms reached a crescendo that made nearby Zephyrians spontaneously combust and sent 3 klaxons into their defensive shell configurations. Whatever was about to be revealed about this seemingly ordinary human, Quartermaster A had the sinking feeling that his nice quiet job was about to become significantly more interesting than he'd ever wanted it to be. The sound of rapid footsteps echoed through the corridor as Medical Officer Morton arrived at a dead sprint, his 6 limbs moving with the kind of coordinated precision that only came from years of medical emergency training. His elongated head bobbed frantically as he clutched a data pad, displaying the scanner readings that had apparently sent half the medical bay into what could charitably be described as organized panic. By the 7 moons of Altair, Morton gasped, skidding to a halt beside the still wailing scanner. His 3 eyes focused independently on Brandon, the scanner display, and his data pad in a way that would have made most species dizzy just watching. These readings cannot possibly be accurate. That's what I keep telling people, Brandon said agreeably, still standing in the scanner like he was waiting for a particularly slow elevator. But hey, I'm not the one with the medical degree. Morton's primary eye twitched as he consulted his data pad. According to this data, your epidermis shows scarring consistent with Category 12 plasma weaponry exposure. He looked up at Brandon with the expression of someone trying to solve a puzzle where all the pieces were on fire. Category 12 weapons are capable of melting through starship hulls in under 30 seconds. Brandon glanced down at a faded mark on his shoulder. That one? Yeah, that's from last Tuesday. Last Tuesday, Judge Quintara repeated in the tone of someone whose worldview was rapidly crumbling. Tuesday morning, Brandon clarified helpfully. Around 11, I think. Had to wrap up early because I had lunch plans. Morton's data pad made a concerning beeping sound as he scrolled through more results. This tissue analysis indicates cellular regeneration following exposure to hard vacuum. The pressure differential alone should have caused your blood to literally boil while your lungs exploded and your tissues flash froze simultaneously. Oh? That? Brandon nodded with recognition. Yeah, that was a fun one. Really gets the blood pumping, you know? Nothing like a good vacuum exposure to wake you up in the morning. Moran's mandibles clicked so rapidly they sounded like a malfunctioning printer. You consider vacuum exposure recreational? Well, not recreational exactly, Brandon said thoughtfully. More like part of the routine. Tuesday is vacuum day, Wednesday is radiation training, Thursday we do the acid baths. You know how it is. The gathering crowd of aliens exchanged glances that communicated volumes about their collective mental state. Quartermaster A was beginning to suspect that his species' evolutionary response of hiding under rocks, when confronted with incomprehensible threats, was looking more sensible by the minute. Morton's voice rose another octave as he continued reading. These bone density scans show evidence of surviving radiation levels that should have liquefied your skeletal structure at the molecular level. The isotope signatures suggest exposure to weapons-grade antimatter detonations. Antimatter Wednesday, Brandon said brightly. Though we usually just call it hump day, really helps break up the work week, you know? Work week, Judge Quintara said faintly. Training week. Technically, Brandon corrected, though I guess the distinction doesn't matter much if you're not human. That's when it hit them. The collective realization spread through the gathered aliens, like a shockwave of existential terror. These weren't battle scars. These weren't the marks of a warrior who had fought gods and monsters and somehow lived to tell the tale. These were training scars. This human had survived Category 12 plasma weaponry, hard vacuum exposure, and antimatter radiation as part of his regular exercise routine. Morton dropped his datapad. The clatter echoed through the suddenly silent corridor like the sound of everyone's remaining sanity hitting the floor. Training, Moran whispered, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had just realized that everything he thought he knew about the universe was wrong. Yeah, basic stuff really, Brandon said, apparently oblivious to the psychological breakdown he was causing among the station's most highly trained professionals. I mean, you gotta start somewhere. Can't just jump straight into the advanced courses without building up a foundation first. The sound of heavy boots on metal decking announced the arrival of Commander Tom Malley, his imposing figure cutting through the crowd with the kind of authoritative presence that made seasoned criminals confess just to avoid disappointing him. His scarred face, marked by campaigns across 17 sectors, bore the expression of someone who had seen the worst the galaxy had to offer and was prepared to deal with it accordingly. "What's the situation here, Quartermaster?" His voice carried the kind of calm authority that suggested he was either completely in control or had given up on sanity entirely. "Sir," Quartermaster A's voice cracked like a teenager asking someone to prom. "The scanner has identified this human as having survived combat with divine entities, exposure to planet-killing weaponry, and radiation levels that should have rendered him a glowing puddle." Commander Marley's eyes narrowed as he studied Brandon, who offered a cheerful wave in response. "And the human's explanation for these anomalies?" "Tuesday morning workout routine, sir." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that suggested the universe itself was taking a moment to process what it had just heard. Commander Marley's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes suggested that his worldview was currently being renovated with high explosives. "Workout routine," he repeated slowly, as if testing the words to see if they would make more sense the second time around. "Standard human physical conditioning protocol," Brandon confirmed, with the kind of helpfulness that made everyone present wish he would stop being helpful. "Though I'll admit I've been slacking lately. Haven't done a proper antimatter exposure session in weeks. My trainer would probably have some words about that." Commander Marley closed his eyes and took what appeared to be a calming breath. When he opened them again, his expression had shifted from authoritative confusion to the look of someone who was beginning to suspect that the universe had developed a sense of humor, and that he was the punchline. "Human," he said carefully, "I'm going to need you to explain exactly what constitutes a normal training regimen for your species." Brandon brightened visibly. "Oh sure, I'd be happy to break it down for you. Fair warning though, it might take a while. We're pretty thorough about physical fitness back home." And with those words, Commander Marley realized that what he had initially assumed would be a simple security incident was about to become something far more complicated, far more disturbing, and quite possibly far more dangerous than anything he had encountered in his 30-year military career. Brandon rubbed the back of his neck with the kind of sheepish expression that suggested he was about to explain something embarrassing, rather than potentially civilization ending. "Okay, so where do I start? I guess with the basics. Monday mornings we usually do our cardio, which is pretty standard stuff. 5-mile run through the minefield, obstacle course under plasma fire, that sort of thing." Commander Marley blinked slowly. "Minefield. Live mines obviously," Brandon clarified as if this was an important distinction. "Training with dummy mines doesn't really get your heart rate up the same way. Plus, the explosion patterns help with agility training. Nothing teaches you proper footwork like knowing that your next step might turn you into confetti." Morton made a sound that was somewhere between a whimper and the noise a small animal makes when it realizes it's being stalked by something much larger and hungrier. His datapad slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers for the second time in 10 minutes. The obstacle course, Judge Quintara said carefully, her 6 eyes focusing on Brandon, with the intensity of someone trying to determine if she was talking to a lunatic or something far worse, involves plasma fire. Well, yeah, Brandon nodded enthusiastically. I mean, you can't really call it training if there's no real danger involved, right? Tuesday's resistance training, so we usually hit the acid pools for a few laps, maybe some underwater welding practice in the lava tubes. Wednesday is strength training, so that's when we break out the gravitational amplifiers and practice lifting, while getting crushed by about 50 times normal gravity. The silence that followed was so complete that you could have heard a pin drop, assuming pins were capable of making noise while falling through a vacuum of pure existential horror. Acid pools, Moran repeated weakly, his mandibles clicking in what appeared to be an involuntary nervous tick. For resistance training, Brandon confirmed. Burns off the dead skin really gets the blood flowing. Plus, the chemical burns help build up your pain tolerance. Thursday is my personal favorite though. That's when we do meditation and stress management. Meditation, Commander Marley said, and there was something in his voice that suggested he was clinging to this word like a life preserver in a storm of insanity. Yeah, inner peace is really important for maintaining focus during combat, Brandon explained earnestly. We usually meditate while juggling live grenades. The trick is to find your center while knowing that a moment's distraction will result in you being distributed across several zip codes. Really helps with concentration. Live grenades, Judge Quintara said faintly. Standard issue fragmentation devices. Brandon nodded. Though some of the advanced students use antimatter charges. I'm still working my way up to those. My instructor says I need to improve my inner harmony before I graduate to weapons that can accidentally delete small moons. The assembled aliens exchanged looks that communicated several competing theories about what they were witnessing. The leading hypothesis seemed to be that they were either experiencing a collective hallucination or that the universe had finally decided to stop making sense entirely. That's when Admiral Vashi arrived. Admiral Vashi was the kind of military leader whose reputation preceded her like a sonic boom. She had commanded fleets in the galactic border wars, negotiated treaties that had prevented 3 separate species from going extinct, and once stared down a black hole until it apologized and agreed to relocate to a less inconvenient part of space. When Admiral Vashi walked into a room, reality itself snapped to attention. What is the nature of this disturbance? She demanded, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made gravitational fields think twice about their career choices. Ma'am, Commander Marley straightened to attention so quickly that he nearly achieved escape velocity. We have a human explaining his species training protocols. Admiral Vashi's expression shifted through several recognizable stages. Professional interest, growing concern, dawning horror, and finally settling on what could best be described as strategic paranoia. Training protocols, she repeated slowly. Commander, are you telling me that this human is engaged in psychological warfare against station personnel? Oh no, Brandon interjected cheerfully. This isn't warfare. This is just basic fitness stuff. Want to see some videos? I've got last week's workout session on my datapad. Before anyone could object or possibly flee the station entirely, Brandon had produced a small device and was scrolling through what appeared to be an extensive video library. Here we go. This is from Friday's fun run. We call it fun run because it's the end of the week, and everyone's feeling pretty relaxed by then. The video began playing, and the assembled aliens watched in mounting horror as human beings casually jogged through what appeared to be an active war zone. Explosions bloomed around the runners like deadly flowers. Energy beams carved smoking trenches in the ground mere feet from their path, and overhead, massive mechanical devices rained down projectiles that would have been classified as war crimes by 17 different galactic conventions. See, the trick is to maintain a steady pace, Brandon narrated, helpfully as on-screen humans dodged artillery fire with the casual grace of people avoiding puddles on a rainy day. You don't want to sprint because that'll tire you out before the really challenging obstacles, but you also can't go too slow or you'll get caught in the blast radius of the plasma mortars. Moran's sensory array retracted entirely into his shell. Morting had begun what appeared to be hyperventilating, if hyperventilating was possible for a species that breathed through specialized gills. Judge Quintara was staring at the screen with the expression of someone whose legal training had not prepared her for adjudicating crimes against the laws of physics. "This is a recreational activity," Admiral Vashi said, and her voice carried the tone of someone trying to convince herself that what she was seeing couldn't possibly be real. "Well, fun run is more of a stress reliever," Brandon corrected. "The real training happens earlier in the week. Want to see Tuesday's acid pool marathon? That one's pretty exciting." Johnson actually managed to swim through the concentrated sulfuric section without dissolving this time, which was a personal best for him. "Personal best," Commander Mali repeated numbly. "Yeah, last time he made it about halfway through before we had to fish out his skeleton and grow him a new body," Brandon said with obvious pride. "The regeneration tanks are really coming along nicely. We've got the full body reconstruction time down to about 6 hours now." The video continued playing, showing humans performing feats that violated so many known laws of physics that several theoretical scientists in distant galaxies spontaneously developed headaches. They watched as humans lifted objects that should have collapsed into neutron stars under their own weight, survived explosions that should have converted them into their component atoms, and generally behaved as if the universe's attempts to kill them were merely suggestions rather than immutable laws. "This is impossible," Morting whispered, his medical training warring with the evidence of his own senses. "Nah, just takes practice," Brandon said, modestly. "I mean, everyone starts somewhere. When I was a kid, I could barely survive a Class 4 hurricane without protection. Took years of training before I could handle a proper tsunami. My parents were really patient with me." Admiral Vashi slowly closed her eyes and began what appeared to be a breathing exercise designed to prevent her brain from shutting down entirely. When she opened them again, she fixed Brandon with a stare that had once convinced an entire rebel fleet to surrender without firing a shot. "Human," she said carefully, "I need you to clarify something for me. Are you telling us that your species engages in these activities for enjoyment?" "Well, that and staying in shape," Brandon nodded. "I mean, you can't just sit around all day eating processed food and watching entertainment programs. Your body needs challenge, you know. Stress. A little healthy competition with the fundamental forces of the universe." And that's when the final, horrible truth settled over the assembled aliens like a blanket made of existential dread. The humans weren't training for war, they weren't preparing for some cosmic battle against forces beyond imagination. They weren't even doing this because they had to. They were doing it because they thought it was fun. The universe, it seemed, had developed a sense of humor, and that sense of humor had an appetite for irony that bordered on the sadistic. General Krafnog arrived with the kind of dramatic flair that suggested he had been practicing his entrance in front of a mirror for several years. His massive frame filled the corridor as he strode forward, medals jangling with each step, his forearms gesturing in what could only be described as aggressively authoritative. Behind him trailed a small army of security personnel, each one looking like they would rather be facing down a supernova than dealing with whatever crisis had summoned the general from his strategic planning session. "I have been monitoring this situation from the command center," General Krafnog announced, his voice carrying the kind of gravitas usually reserved for declaring war or announcing the end of civilizations. "And I have reached a conclusion. This human represents a clear and present danger to station security." "Oh, come on," Brandon said, looking genuinely hurt. "I haven't even done anything yet. I'm literally just trying to buy groceries." "Trying to buy groceries," General Krafnog repeated with the tone of someone who suspected those groceries might include materials for constructing planet killers. "After demonstrating capabilities that exceed our understanding of biological possibility," Brandon sighed, the kind of deep, patient sigh that suggested this wasn't his first time dealing with what he probably considered paranoid aliens. "Look, I get that the training videos might seem a little intense if you're not used to it. How about I show you some of the easier stuff? Maybe that'll help put things in perspective." Easier stuff, Admiral Vashi said weakly, as if the concept itself might cause her brain to shut down in self-defense. Yeah, family-friendly activities. Kid stuff. Brandon scrolled through his datapad with the enthusiasm of someone sharing vacation photos. Here we go. This is from last month's Community Fun Day. My nephew's school put together a playground competition. The video began, and what the aliens saw would later be described by station psychologists as the moment several perfectly rational beings began questioning the nature of reality itself. The screen showed what Brandon called a playground, but what appeared to be a carefully engineered torture facility designed by someone who hated the concept of childhood. Children, actual human offspring, were gleefully throwing themselves off structures that towered hundreds of feet into the air, bouncing off devices that launched them at velocities that should have liquefied their internal organs, and engaging in activities that the Galactic Safety Commission would have classified as attempted suicide by playground equipment. See how little Timmy there navigates the spinning blade obstacle. Brandon pointed proudly at a small human who was casually dodging through what appeared to be a meat grinder, designed for giants. He's only 7, but he's already showing real potential. And there's Sarah on the lava monkey bars. She's been training for months to build up her heat resistance. Judge Quintara made a sound that was somewhere between a sob and the noise a computer makes when it's trying to process information that exceeds its programming parameters. The children, she whispered, are volunteering for this. Well, yeah, Brandon said, looking confused by her distress. It's a playground. Of course they're volunteering. That's what makes it fun. General Krafnog's primary weapon hand was twitching in a way that suggested he was seriously considering whether shooting Brandon would solve the problem or just make it worse. This is clearly weapons testing disguised as recreational activity. Weapons testing? Brandon blinked. These are just normal playground activities. Though I guess if you want to see some real sports, I could show you some extreme athletics footage. Mountain climbing, base jumping, volcano surfing, that sort of thing. Volcano surfing, Commander Marley repeated in the tone of someone whose sanity was hanging by a very thin thread. Yeah, it's great cardio, Brandon said enthusiastically. Plus the sulfur is really good for your skin. My buddy Jake holds the record for the longest lava tube ride. Nearly 47 minutes before the board melted and he had to swim the rest of the way. Swim, Morton said faintly, through lava. Well, it's more of a doggy paddle really. The viscosity makes proper swimming strokes pretty difficult. That's when Brandon's communication device chimed, and a cheerful female voice filled the corridor. Hey Brandon, how's the grocery run going? Oh hey Amy, Brandon said, activating the video call. Just having a little cultural exchange with the locals. Everyone, this is Amy Kowalski. She's from my old unit. Amy Kowalski's face appeared on the screen looking remarkably cheerful for someone who appeared to be standing in front of what looked like the mouth of hell itself. Behind her, rivers of molten rock flowed like deadly waterfalls, and the air shimmered with heat that would have been instantly fatal to most known life forms. Nice to meet you all, Amy said brightly, waving at the collection of aliens who were staring at her with the expression of people watching their nightmares come to life. Sorry I can't chat long. Just finished my morning jog, and I need to get to the decontamination showers before the radiation burns set in too deep. Morning jog, Admiral Vashi repeated numbly. Yeah, did my usual route through the volcanic highlands, Amy explained cheerfully. Nearly got caught in that new magma flow, but managed to outrun it. Good thing too, last week when Peterson got caught in one of those he was picking lava chunks out of his hair for days. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that suggested several highly trained military minds were simultaneously trying to process information that their evolution had never prepared them to handle. Amy, Brandon said conversationally, you're kind of freaking out my new friends here. Maybe tone down the casual surviving certain death thing. Oh, sorry, Amy said, looking genuinely apologetic. I forget how different things are off-world. Don't worry, everyone. This is totally normal human behavior. We're really not as dangerous as we look. Not as dangerous as you look, Judge Quintara whispered, and there was something in her voice that suggested she was beginning to understand that her entire legal framework was inadequate for dealing with a species that considered volcanoes suitable jogging terrain. It was at this moment that Admiral Drahorn chose to make his entrance. Admiral Drahorn was known throughout the fleet for his unshakable composure, his tactical brilliance, and his ability to remain calm in situations that would drive lesser beings to gibbering madness. He took one look at the video call showing Amy Kowalski casually standing in what appeared to be the surface of a small star, listened to approximately 30 seconds of conversation about radiation burns as a minor inconvenience, and promptly fainted. The sound of Admiral Drahorn hitting the deck plates echoed through the corridor like a gong, and seemed to serve as some kind of signal for the station's automated systems. Warning lights began flashing, and the calm voice of the station's AI announced, "Yellow alert status activated. All non-essential personnel report to designated safe areas." "This is not a drill." "Oh, come on," Brandon said, looking around at the chaos his simple grocery run had apparently caused. "It's really not that big a deal. Humans do this stuff all the time." "All the time," General Krafnog repeated, and there was something in his voice that suggested he was beginning to suspect that the universe had fundamentally changed when he wasn't paying attention, and that humanity represented something that his military training had never prepared him to deal with. Amy's voice crackled over the communicator as medics rushed to attend to the unconscious Admiral Drahorn. "Brandon, are you causing an interstellar incident again?" "Apparently," Brandon sighed. "Honestly, I just wanted to pick up some of those Altarian fruit snacks. You know, the ones that explode in your mouth?" "Wait," Amy said, her expression brightening. "Are those the ones that are supposed to be deadly to most carbon-based life forms?" "Yeah, those are the ones. Great flavor though." The assembled aliens listened to this exchange with the growing realization that not only were humans apparently indestructible, but they considered foods that were literally poisonous to the rest of the galaxy to be casual snack items. Station security was now at yellow alert because a human wanted to buy fruit snacks that could kill most sentient beings, and apparently this was just Tuesday for humanity. General Krafnog closed his eyes and began what appeared to be a meditation technique designed to prevent complete psychological breakdown. When he opened them again, his expression had shifted from military alertness to something that resembled existential acceptance. "Human," he said carefully, "I am beginning to suspect that our definitions of normal may be somewhat different." It was at this moment, watching Admiral Drahorn being loaded onto a medical stretcher, while Amy cheerfully waved goodbye from what appeared to be the surface of a miniature sun, that Brandon Torres finally had what humans would call a light bulb moment. The expression on his face shifted from casual confusion to dawning understanding, like someone who had just realized they'd been speaking the wrong language for the entire conversation. "Oh," he said, his voice carrying the tone of someone who had just figured out why everyone at the party was staring at him. "Oh, I see what's happening here. You guys think we're some kind of super warriors, don't you?" The assembled aliens exchanged glances that communicated several volumes about their collective mental state. Judge Quintana nodded slowly, apparently having given up on the concept of dignity somewhere around the Volcano jogging incident. "The evidence does seem to suggest," she said carefully, "that your species possesses capabilities that exceed normal biological parameters by several orders of magnitude." Brandon actually laughed, a sound that made several security personnel reach for weapons they probably wouldn't have trusted against whatever they thought he was. "That's hilarious. We're not warriors, we're not super soldiers, we're not even particularly tough by universal standards." "Not tough," General Krafnog repeated in the tone of someone whose worldview was being systematically demolished by facts that refused to make sense. "Nah," Brandon shook his head, grinning with the kind of genuine amusement that somehow made the situation even more terrifying. "We're just survivors. See, the thing you have to understand is that Earth, our home planet, is what most galactic surveys would classify as a Class 12 death world." The corridor fell silent except for the gentle humming of life support systems and the distant sound of Admiral Drahorn being revived with what appeared to be military-grade stimulants. "Death world," Morting whispered, his medical training finally providing a framework for understanding what he was witnessing. Yeah, Class 12 is pretty much the worst rating you can get and still technically qualify as habitable, Brandon explained with the casual air of someone discussing the weather. Our atmosphere is 21% oxygen, which makes everything incredibly flammable. Our weather systems regularly produce wind speeds that can level cities, water movements that can reshape continents, and ground vibrations that can split mountains in half. Commander Marley was taking notes now, apparently having shifted from crisis management to damage assessment. These natural phenomena occur regularly. Oh sure, hurricane season happens every year. Earthquake activity is pretty much constant. We get the occasional tsunami that wipes out entire coastlines. Brandon shrugged as if this was perfectly reasonable. You learn to work around it. Work around it, Judge Quintara said faintly. And then there's the wildlife, Brandon continued cheerfully, apparently oblivious to the psychological carnage he was causing. Sharks that can bite through steel, bears that can bench press small vehicles, insects that inject neurotoxins for fun, plants that explode when you touch them, and pretty much everything else either wants to eat you, poison you, or use you as a breeding ground for its offspring. Moran's mandibles had stopped clicking entirely. His sensory array remained firmly retracted, as if his species' evolutionary response to incomprehensible danger had finally kicked in. So you see, Brandon said with the patient tone of someone explaining something obvious to a child, we're not dangerous because we're warriors. We're dangerous because anything that survives to adulthood on Earth has to be tough enough to laugh at things that would kill most other species. The truth of it settled over the assembled aliens like a blanket made of existential horror. Humans weren't a military species. They weren't conquerors or destroyers or cosmic threats. They were simply the end result of evolution, on a planet that had spent millions of years trying to kill everything on it. And the only things that had survived were the ones that had learned to treat planetary-scale disasters as minor inconveniences. The scanner, which had been quietly processing this information, suddenly chimed with what sounded like electronic satisfaction. Biological scan complete. Species classification, unkillable. Threat level, depends on mood. Recommended approach, appeasement. Unkillable is a bit much, Brandon said modestly. I mean, we die eventually. It just takes more effort than most people are willing to put in. General Krufnog closed his eyes and appeared to be engaging in the kind of deep breathing exercises that suggested he was either achieving enlightenment or having a complete nervous breakdown. You came here to purchase groceries. Yeah, just need to pick up a few things, Brandon confirmed, pulling out what appeared to be an ordinary shopping list. Let's see, Amy wanted some of those Rigillion energy crystals for her protein shakes. I need to grab some antimatter seasoning for the barbecue this weekend. Oh, and Mum asked me to pick up a few pounds of that compressed uranium stuff. She's making her famous cake for the church bake sale. The shopping list, when viewed by alien eyes, read like an inventory for constructing weapons of mass destruction. Energy crystals capable of powering starships, antimatter in any quantity larger than a few atoms, and compressed uranium that could theoretically be used to build devices that deleted star systems from existence. Church bake sale, Admiral Vashi said numbly. Yeah, Mom's cake is legendary. Last year she accidentally used a little too much concentrated plasma extract, and the cake achieved fusion. Lit up the whole neighborhood for weeks. Good time. There was a moment of collective realization among the station personnel, a moment when they understood that trying to stop this human from purchasing materials that could level civilizations was not only impossible, but also completely pointless, because he was going to use them to bake a cake for a religious gathering. Quartermaster A. General Krufnog said slowly, I believe our new protocol for dealing with humans should be give them whatever they want and try not to think about what they're going to do with it. Yes, sir, Quartermaster, I replied, his voice carrying the tone of someone who had found peace through acceptance of the incomprehensible. The scanner chimed one final time, security clearance granted. Welcome to Galactic Station Omega-7, human Brandon Torres. Please enjoy your stay and try not to accidentally destroy anything. No promises, Brandon said cheerfully, stepping out of the scanner and heading toward the commercial district, but I'll do my best. As he walked away humming what sounded like a cheerful tune about surviving the apocalypse, the assembled aliens stood in the corridor, staring after him with the kind of expression usually reserved for watching natural disasters or philosophical concepts that hurt to think about. "You know," Judge Quintara said finally, "I think I'm going to recommend that we add a new regulation to the station handbook." "What kind of regulation?" Commander Marley asked. "When humans want to buy groceries," she said thoughtfully, "we just let them buy groceries, and then we all go find somewhere else to be for a while." And somewhere in the distance the sound of Brandon Torres whistling echoed through the corridors, a cheerful reminder that the universe was far stranger, far more dangerous, and far more inexplicable than any of them had ever imagined. The scanner's final diagnostic scrolled across its display, "Note for future reference. Humans consider planetary extinction events to be weather. Adjust expectations accordingly."